It's 3 a.m. and you're standing in your basement in a t-shirt, flashlight shaking in your hand, staring at a black smear crawling up the drywall behind the water heater. The air is thick and damp, and it smells like wet paper left in a closet for a year. A family in Boone County, West Virginia never fought this fight, not once, in over 100 years. $1, 15 minutes. I'm holding the document that proves it. The first time I drove out to Boone County, West Virginia, the fog hadn't lifted off the ridge yet, and my GPS gave up half a mile from the house. That's where I met Thomas Wexford, 74 years old, built like a man who'd spent his whole life splitting wood and mending fence, living in a stone foundation farmhouse his great-grandfather raised in 1911. I'd come because a neighbor of his mentioned, almost in passing, that Wexford's basement had never once had a mold problem, in a house dug straight into a hillside that stays damp 9 months out of 12. He walked me down a set of worn stone steps into that cellar himself, and instead of the musty wall I expected, I found something dry, chalky white, almost powdery to the touch. He hadn't used paint, he hadn't used sealant. What coated those walls was a rough finish he mixed by hand, the exact same way his grandmother had taught him 50 years earlier. He didn't even call it a product. He just called it the wash, like it was something everybody used to know, the same way you'd know to check the mail or bank the wood stove at night. He told me his father did it every spring without being asked, the same weekend the fence got mended, and never once explained why beyond, it's just what you do down there. I didn't understand what I was looking at until I started digging through the archives afterward, chasing down why a chalky white mineral would matter enough to pass down for 4 generations without a single label or instruction sheet. And when I found what I found, you'll understand why what I'm about to show you matters. Subscribe now, because what's in that archive changes how you see every wall in your house. Modern advice tells you to seal the problem in. Waterproof basement paint, plastic vapor barriers stapled over the studs, a dehumidifier running around the clock and adding to your electric bill every single month. Here's what almost nobody explains to you standing in that hardware store aisle. Sealing a damp masonry wall with a plastic-based paint traps the moisture that's already inside the block or stone, and that moisture has nowhere left to go but back out through the surface, feeding the exact mold the paint was supposed to stop. You end up repainting the same wall 2 years later, telling yourself the first coat must have been a bad batch, when really the wall was never allowed to dry the way it needed to. Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory's Federal Research Compilation puts dampness or mold in roughly 47% of American homes, closer to 1 in 2 than 1 in 3. The waterproofing paint industry, the mold remediation industry, and the dehumidifier manufacturers all profit the exact same way. Every time your basement stays sealed and damp underneath, someone gets a repeat customer next spring. But here's what families in Boone County never did, not once, in over a century of wet Appalachian springs. And it's the reason Thomas Wexford's basement walls are still bone dry, still crack-free, more than 115 years after they were built, standing through the exact kind of weather that's currently rotting your drywall from the inside out. The forgotten method is a lime wash, ordinary hydrated lime, mixed with water into a thin chalky paint, brushed directly onto bare stone, brick, or block. Its alkalinity, with a pH well above 12, gives mold spores neither the chemistry nor the stable moisture they need to take hold. A peer-reviewed study published through the National Institutes of Health confirms that lime-plastered walls actively buffer indoor moisture and resist mold growth precisely because the material stays breathable rather than sealed. Here's the plain analogy Wexford's own basement makes obvious. Mold trying to colonize a lime-washed wall is like a plant trying to root in soil that's been thoroughly salted. The surface simply refuses to support it. Lime also stays breathable in a way plastic-based sealants never are. So trapped moisture inside the wall keeps evaporating outward instead of pooling silently behind a sealed layer. When I asked Wexford directly why it worked, he said something I haven't stopped thinking about since: paint fights the water. Lime just tells the wall it isn't welcome to stay wet. It doesn't wear out season to season, it doesn't need resealing every year, and it takes no special skill at all to apply correctly. No contractor, no specialty tool, nothing beyond a bucket, a brush, and an afternoon. Here's why nobody told you this. It is not a conspiracy. It is worse than that. Waterproofing paint manufacturers, mold remediation franchises, and dehumidifier makers are all selling you the same repeat purchase year after year, on the exact same wall, for the exact same recurring problem. A conspiracy you can fight because someone made a decision you can point to and hold them to. A system you cannot see is harder to fight because it just feels like the way things are, Like basements are simply supposed to smell a little damp. Like a remediation bill every few years is simply part of owning an older house. Like buying the same sealant twice is just responsible homeownership instead of a wall that was never fixed the first time. Hydrated lime costs about $1 a pound and, applied correctly, never needs replacing at all. There's no cartridge to refill, no service contract to renew, no annual reapplication to sell you, and no franchise fee attached to it anywhere. That's precisely why it quietly disappeared off hardware store shelves and out of home improvement advice around the same decade that vapor barrier paint turned into a billion-dollar shelf category on its own, replacing a fix that never needed replacing with one that has to be sold again every single spring. Here's exactly what to buy and how to use it. Go to any hardware store and ask for Mason's Hydrated Lime, sometimes labeled Builder's Lime, and a 10-pound bag runs under $10. Grab a stiff bristle masonry brush and a plastic mixing bucket while you're there, both $1 or $2 a piece. In that bucket, mix roughly 1 part lime powder to 2 parts water, stirring until it's the texture of thin pancake batter, no lumps left sitting on the bottom, and let it sit 5 minutes before you use it. Brush it directly onto bare stone, brick, or block, never over existing latex paint, since it needs a porous surface underneath to properly bond and breathe. 2 thin coats, about 20 minutes apart, and the whole job is done in under an hour. Gloves and eye protection on the entire time since wet lime is caustic to skin and eyes. You can knock this out on a Saturday afternoon without touching a single power tool, and one 10-pound bag easily covers an average basement wall section with some left over. Here's what you'll notice week by week afterward. Week 1, that damp closet smell fades noticeably every time you walk down there. Week 2, condensation stops beating on the surface after cold nights. Week 3, any active spotting you had stops spreading any further at all. By week 4, the wall stays visibly dry even after a hard rain outside, the same way Wexford's has for over a century. Inside a university agricultural extension archive, in a collection of pre-1945 farm bulletins most people will never know exists, there's a thin pamphlet written by a county extension agent named Silas Pruitt in 1911. Its title, printed plainly on a brown cover page, Home Preservation and the Prevention of Dampness in Cellar Walls. I held that pamphlet in my own hands, careful with pages that felt like they might crumble at the corners, in a reading room so quiet I could hear the archivist turning pages 2 tables away. Pruitt wrote that farm families across his county who whitewashed their cellars with lime every spring reported, in his own words, no growth of black mold, even in seasons of great wet. That single line changes everything about how you should look at this. It means what Wexford showed me wasn't folklore passed down without a reason behind it, some half-remembered habit nobody ever questioned. It was documented, tested across dozens of households who had no chemical sealants to fall back on if it failed, written down by a government agent whose entire job was reporting what actually worked on real farms, and it worked reliably enough that he recommended every family in his county adopt it as standard practice every single spring without exception. Pruitt even noted which households had gone longest without reapplying, and still showed no sign of trouble, which tells you this wasn't a one-season fluke. It was a pattern he'd tracked deliberately across an entire farming community over years. Is it actually safe to have in my house? Hydrated lime is caustic while it's still wet, so gloves and eye protection during mixing and application aren't optional. But once it's fully cured on the wall, it's chemically inert, and it's been used inside occupied homes, root cellars, and even barns for centuries without a single documented issue. My basement is finished with drywall, not exposed stone. Lime wash needs a porous masonry surface to bond to. So if you've got even one section of exposed block, stone, or unpainted concrete anywhere down there, behind a water heater, along a foundation edge, that's exactly where it belongs, and better airflow alone still helps the drywall sections nearby it. My contractor told me this is outdated and won't hold up to a real winter. Ask him directly why 100-year-old lime-washed foundations are still standing mold-free right now, in the exact same climate, while basements sealed with 1990s waterproof paint often need remediation work every few years without fail. And if you're still not fully convinced after all that, don't take my word for it either. Try it on one small out-of-the-way section first, and just watch what that one section looks like after the next real rainstorm passes through, next to a section you haven't touched, so you're not taking anyone's word for it, not even mine. You didn't lose this knowledge on your own. It was taken from you, one sealant commercial at a time, one service contract at a time, one generation at a time, quietly, until a damp basement just started to feel normal, like something every homeowner is simply supposed to live with and budget for every few years. There's a group of people out there, most of them our age, who've decided they're done being sold ongoing solutions to problems that shouldn't have to exist in the first place. Not when the fix has been sitting on a hardware store shelf the whole time, for $1 a pound, since before any of our grandparents were born. So tell me honestly in the comments below, what's the one damp corner in your own house you've already quietly given up on fixing? The one you just walk past now without really looking at it anymore. If this is the kind of thing that should never have been forgotten, subscribing keeps it coming. Next time, I'm heading into a Depression-era canning cellar tucked into the Ozarks, where a single root vegetable kept entire families fed through brutal winters with no refrigeration at all. And I'll show you the archive document that explains exactly how they pulled it off, sitting in a records room most people don't even know exists, a few counties over from the one we just left. I'll see you there.